This is the Yandere, a level that features a girl who is strangely obsessive towards her boyfriend. And this is Killbot, a level about a virus destroying the computer system. What if these were mixed into one level? Like, we could get a fatal computer virus that loves the user way too much. That's what I Love You is about. Hi, so I made a level about this Yandere virus. This was an entry for the second Zeronium Creator Contest and somehow it got 3rd place. So I'm gonna talk about the creation process of this level and how it ended up high in such a stacked contest. But actually, this wasn't meant to be an entry for the Zeronium contest. Back in October 2024, the NCS Gauntlet contest produced a bunch of awesome levels. But this entry especially stood out to me, which is WannaCry. This level managed to create such an intense atmosphere by utilizing one of the most well-known computer viruses, which led me to think of taking another popular virus and making it a level. Additionally, I was into 90s vaporwave old computer stuff, therefore I released 2 levels of this theme before. Unfortunately, they didn't perform very well in terms of likes and downloads, despite putting way more effort than an unoriginal trash. I guess Rota doesn't like this aesthetic, but who cares? Here goes the 3rd attempt. To carry out this idea, I released the layout way back then. I also decorated the first part a little bit, and then I stopped. The theme required me to design a character, which I had never done before. The only characters I could design were these smiley faces or something. This lack of skill, combined with the Space Conflict contest and real-life issues, led me to procrastinate indefinitely. Fast forward to late January, Zeronium CC2 was announced. The theme of the contest was contrast. The entries had to use 2 contrasting elements such as light and dark, or heaven and hell. This contest theme happened to match really well with the Yandere trace. The level would start out cute and lovely, and after some point it becomes very scary. It's a kind of cliche at this point, but I haven't seen this theme being executed a lot in GD, aside from Peaceful and Collab level. So it would be cool to add one more to the normal things become scary list. I hesitated to take this contest seriously at first, but I decided to take on the challenge in the middle of March. Little did I know that it would be the most ambitious level by me so far. The first part takes place at the entry point of the I Love You software. Since the player is just starting the software, it's likely that the player is not too familiar with that. So I used the bulge, chromatic glitch, and lens shaders to indicate the player being relatively far away from the computer. The song for this level, KATAMARI, constantly switches its pitch. To reflect this, the level also consistently switches its main color between purple and blue. You can call this contrast if you wish. The overall design for this part was inspired by puzzle trials. You can find some similarities like the computer window environment, grid-based block design, and the character at the top. Well, it's time to do the unavoidable. As I said, I haven't seriously designed a character before. I didn't know how to draw eyes, how to get the proportions right, stuff like that. So this took some trial and error. Here are the failed attempts.
Oh, hell no.
Eventually, I decided to borrow the design from Channel's animations. Not only because their videos are fire, the style fits pretty well with the GD modern style. After looking at some references and a few tutorials online, I finally came up with a decent one. Introducing Lovey. Her color scheme is a mix of blue and purple, so it matches well with the level. Also, the hairstyle is supposed to look like the antennae of the computer box. Designing a character was especially challenging in comparison to designing blocks or backgrounds. One small movement is enough to make her look unnatural or straight up ruin my intentions. The precise placement of the objects was an absolute necessity. For this reason, I had to move to Geo so I could use the Pixel Unit Movement button, one of the features of Better Edit. Yes, I've used vanilla GD until making this level. I've been wasting like 3 years of my GD career. Anyway, after adding some animations to the character, the part was done. I'll talk about the animating process in detail a bit later. While this first part is nothing too crazy, I think it does a good job of setting the overall tone. In the transition into the second part, the skull appears from below, pulls you and throws you into the next part. During this, the background from the previous part zooms in and it directly becomes the foreground of the next part. Luckily, I've done this kind of background zooming transition in my previous level, so I already have some know-how on how to implement this. The objects closer to the camera should scale up faster, and those blocks should blend less with the background color as they zoom in. Also, the shaders in the previous part get slowly disabled to show the player getting more immersed in the computer program. Now onto the second part. This part is intended to be the most energetic segment of the whole level, as it conveys the excitement of trying out the new desktop body. Also, it makes the contrast stronger. To match the intent, the gameplay consists of high-speed robot and UFO sections. The layout also has quick chains of spider orbs, so you gotta prepare for fast clicks. To add intensity further, I made some elements react to the beat, such as the zooming camera, pulsing block symbols, and jumping spikes. The block design keeps the block-based approach from the previous part, but also adds in some pipes and slopes so I could make more varied structures. This part also has computer windows as blocks. Some contain a diverse set of app icons, some contain this pulsing heart, and others contain random text. Despite the window itself looking all the same, the contents of the window gave enough variety to the design. Moving on to the background, first I made a scrolling grid to establish a connection with the previous part. And then I made another grid on the floor. This one is surely more complicated since it uses a lot of gradient triggers and the parallax effect. It's hard to get accurate move trigger values, but eventually I learned that the distance between the dots determines how fast should they move. In this case, the dots above have 0.5 time scale, thus the distance between the dots is 5, and the dots below has 0.6 time scale, thus the distance of 6. In order to make them look properly, the perceived speed of those dots should have the proportion of 5 to 6. Since the perceived speed of an object can be calculated as 1 minus mod x, it was possible to make the accurate parallax effect. Finally, I added the pulsing hearts in the background, along with subtle shadows to give an extra depth. Now there needs to be animations in the second part, and those have to be more detailed since she's no longer sleeping or something. However, in the previous part, the grooves and layers of the character were quite messy, so before getting down to animating this part, I knew I needed some organization. This skull can be broken into multiple parts, and each body part is assigned to one set of continuous layers. Also, all body parts have the same L2 layer, so I can easily select the whole thing when necessary. And then each of those parts needs to have a unique group number, along with one pink grouped object to indicate the center, in order to make them movable with keyframes. First, I wrote an entire document about the group numbers, but then I realized that every time I wanted to animate a specific part, I need to go back to this document just to get a group number. This is very time consuming. Or I could memorize those group numbers, like 269 stands for the face, 275 stands for the left hair, and 283 stands for everything, and yeah, screw that. I really wish I could type L here to automatically get 275. And luckily, I wasn't the only one who wished for this. The named editor groups mod by Spaghetti Dev became really handy for this project. This mod is especially useful when you use a certain group number a lot of times. Should be a vanilla feature honestly. After organizing, it's time for the actual animations. To give enough variety, I divided the part into 8 subparts and made sure that each subpart would include one animation. Animating each one roughly follows these 3 steps. First, move the whole thing from point A to B by using keyframe triggers, so we can define the start and end states of the animation. Second, add rotations and modify easing by adding extra keyframes. 2 options in the keyframe triggers become handy for this, curve and wrap only. The curve option is pretty obvious, it transforms the straight path into a curved path. The wrap only option is less obvious though, so let's have a simple example. These 2 keyframe setups are completely the same, but there's only one difference, the keyframe in the middle being wrap only or not. The object above looks like it's moving in 2 steps, and the object below looks like it takes only 1 step to move. The easing curve normally resets on each keyframe, but the wrap only options makes the curve into one continuous line. These options result in the animation looking less choppy and more polished. If you want to know more about those keyframe options, there's a detailed explanation video in the description. As the final step, add details for the individual body parts, especially the hair. This is an important step to make the movements look more realistic. So how would one decide which movement to add and in which timing? The law of inertia might help with answering those questions. I hope you didn't sleep in physics class. In a nutshell, an object wants to keep its velocity in any circumstances. So when the object is moving right, it wants to keep moving right. And if you give an external force to stop the object, it will keep moving right briefly before it completely stops. The same could be said for suddenly adding a force to a static object. There's a little delay between the timing of the force and the actual movement. I think it's a good practice to carefully observe how real-life objects move and think about why they move like this. A little bit of physics knowledge may come in handy. Now repeat these 3 steps 8 times and tweak each of the keyframes like 100 times to make it look right. I say it was totally worth it. Now the level has a very energetic atmosphere along with this girl hooping around. I'm pretty sure nothing bad can happen. You have seen this coming. About the making of this mini transition, there are a few points I wanna talk about. You may notice the screen becomes black briefly before the transition rather than switching instantly. It makes the transition less jarring to look at and adds more to the malfunctioning software vibes. Also, I made sure the gameplay won't be hindered much by these mini transitions. The position of the icon doesn't change much at the start of those transitions, and after and the end of the transitions, inputs are not required for a bit, so you can react to those after a practice run. At the end of this part, you can see the player entering the recycle bin. It's looking like something clearly bad for her. In this transition, you can see the screen wiper approaching. There's a subtle color change here where the whole second part and the screen wiper are getting darker and more desaturated. And at the end of the transition, you can see those triangles being flown away like papers. It suggests that now you are in a trash zone. This is probably the latest transition of this level, but I think it does work decently with the context. This third part is where things start to go wrong. Here in the swingcopter part, you shall find those piles getting replaced with I love you. It's a subtle nod to the real I love you virus back in 2000. This virus used to replace all files in a computer with an I love you message upon its execution. For the atmosphere, I wanted to give a feeling of desolation, so I applied multi-layer parallax so the area feels larger, and added Z-layer particles so this place looks less clean. The gameplay here is relatively easy since you are past the first drop and you should prepare for what's coming next. So this part utilizes the mini swing game mode, which is not familiar to some people, so you can't completely let down your guard. As the spider part starts, she comes back. However, it seems like she isn't supportive anymore. In the previous part, her movements and the main path don't intersect, so you could focus on sight reading the level. However, in this part, she becomes more obstructive and often blocks places where you have to see. She even shatters the jump indicators that were placed before. I'm not sure what you think about this interaction, but at least Robtop would love it as he hates jump indicators. I also think it's a cool way to mess with players. For the gameplay in this part, you will notice that there are a lot of slows you need to interact with. Also, there are some vertical dash yours that represent the vocal chops in the song. This unconventional gameplay inevitably makes the layout linear, thus hindering your progress in the level. For the block design, this part introduces the glitchy block decoration. Well, I stole this from Ruins by Grax. Using a pixel lava texture with a very fast animation speed can create a pretty convincing noise mosaic effect. Additionally, you might see a lot of blocks with missing texture and the blocks with choppy movements. Overall, as you progress further, everything gets more glitchy and corrupted. Every element in this part gives you the message that you shouldn't move forward. However, if you ignore all of this and reach the shutdown button, this happens. Designing the second form of the character requires some thought, like how can I make this as terrifying as possible? I thought about multiple candidates for the second form, and then I chose to just rip it up from Mesmerizer. One thing I learned is that the character with less emotion tends to be creepier. I guess the emotion makes it more human-like, so that feature has to be removed. Now this last part is all about chaos. Everything you knew about this level is completely shifted. The gameplay so far has been in a straight line. There was no y-axis shift of the camera, it just moved forward. And now the change of the y-axis happens very frequently. Not only that, the game mode changes happen much more often. It's commonly referred to as flow gameplay. While I'm not a big fan of that type of layout, I thought it suited well here given the chaotic nature of this part. In addition to this part being chaotic, I wanted this part to be player unfriendly, like the level hates you and you should leave this place right away. So there are bad game designs that were intentionally employed. For example, this part introduces pink orbs that you totally should press. And real orbs are incorrectly marked with X's. Also, as you progress, the glitch effect happens randomly along with the volume change. Those make an effective contrast to the earlier parts where Lobby tries to help the player pass by placing correct indicators or such. I considered adding fake indicators in this part, but that would be too much given how learny the part already is. Decorating this part was particularly challenging since I usually make clean looking modern levels, and the premise of this section was the complete opposite of clean. Despite this, it was very interesting to switch out the style and I think it turned out pretty well. I started with the shader combo grayscale plus sepia with an extremely high value, thanks to Quali for making a tutorial about it. And then I made a spawn loop which involves two different shader shadings, making this part even glitchier. Next I made this reddish scrolling background which is inspired by the final fight in Mother 2. I made 4 of these scrolling backgrounds and made another spawn loop to randomly switch between these 4. Those 2 spawn loops, one for the shader and another for the background, have the random delay values, making the spawn timing irregular probably as for chaos. The blocks here are designed like the corrupted version of the second part. The square blocks and windows are back, but evil. Still, there are some deco additions here, aside from making them evil, such as the broken screen and the bouncing ball thingy. Anyway, if you survive all of this chaos, you finally reach the shutdown button again. By the way, if you didn't complete the level and you're skilled enough to beat medium demons, I recommend stopping this video now and try beating the level by yourself. A spoiler warning for a GD level is crazy, but it's a thing here. There goes the ending sequence. So if you are in the practice mode or using the start pose, the level just ends here. However, if you reach the end in the normal mode, yup, here's the final contrast. You thought the level had ended, but it hasn't. One interesting aspect about computer viruses is that they affect the user outside the screen, so it would be fitting to add a cutscene that breaks the fourth wall. However, if there is a lack of reason why these moments exist, maybe it would surprise players for one time, but it wouldn't leave an everlasting impact on them. Since the novelty of the fourth wall breaking concept is gone after Rage Quit, I had to put in more work besides the cutscene itself. That's why the entire intro cutscene exists, featuring a cube running the cursed software, and the level ends by the showing the player being trapped inside the computer because of Lovi. This makes up for a complete story and adds a valid reason for why the fake entry exists. Well, that's at least what I intended. Feel free to share what you think about the story. By the way, the upcoming showcase video will omit this final cutscene since some viewers may jump straight into the showcase. I don't want to ruin their surprise if they actually try out the level. If you watched this boring video so far, you'd probably listen to literally anything about this level, unless you skipped to this chapter for some reason. So here are 7 useless facts about I Love You. After releasing the level, I sent this level to some random streamers, and some of them didn't even pass the intro because they closed this window after opening it. There exists the P2 proceed text at the bottom, but I guess it wasn't very clear, so I added press P2 text in this window, and animated the text at the bottom to make it clearer. One of the service terms mentions the obfuscated messages. I wonder if they actually exist? If you look closely at the background in the first part, you can skip this blue orb that Lobby gives you, don't let her know this. If you are a veteran potato enjoyer, you might remember the layout of the final part looking like this. Game mode changes didn't happen frequently and the camera wipes still stayed the same. It was completely remade after because the gameplay wasn't chaotic enough. I believe this was one of the best decisions regarding the level. I expected this to be placed at like top 6 to 10 in this contest, so after the many level jump scare at 7th, I thought it was so over. Now that I think of it, my level wasn't necessarily better. Some other levels had decoration that looked nicer or had better progression. But I think my level stood out with its theme and its execution, and it mattered more in the context of this contest. Even though this level isn't rated at the time of editing this, it already surpassed Happiness Injection and Gradient in the number of likes. I take it as a win. Anyway, here's the showcase of this level. This concludes the video about the mixture of the Yandere and Killbot. Before ending this video, I want to say something about future plans. I feel like character animations are pretty underrated in GD. While there are a few successful levels with those, they don't get created very often in the first place. So my future levels may lean toward that stuff. Not only are they a good way to make a level more memorable, but also executing those animations is fun and rewarding. Please consider subscribing if you're interested. And of course, there are people I need to thank for helping this level exist in the first place. First, thanks to Geronium and others for hosting the amazing creator contest. It was such an interesting theme to work on, and it was fun to watch how others approached this theme. Second, thanks to all creators who made inspiring works. All inspirations are credited in-game and the video description. Third, thanks to Frozen Legends or Pico was a swan for playtesting and finding gameplay issues throughout the level. Fourth, thanks to Femtunnel for making this awesome song, and finally, thank you for watching this and possibly playing the level. See you in the next video, and I hope my next level won't take as long.